So today I'm doing more of a casual behind the scenes video, talking more about the actual technical process behind how a lot of things in the game even work. So that ranges from fixing bugs and adding content. So things that I've done as well as what the actual developers do. And I want to go through that because I feel that it's important to at least talk about that once so people can understand, okay, well, this is how the game actually works internally, instead of just guessing and taking my word for it whenever I say, well, it's actually really easy to do this and it's simple. Obviously, you have no idea. You've never even seen the internals of the files. You don't know how exactly the game works. So, obviously, I'm not going to do a total deep dive here, but I'm going to go a bit more in detail and I hope share enough. And I'm going to go through and do a few interesting things like reworking companions, touching on ship combat and how that's not doing so well, and also fixing general bugs that I feel should have been fixed sooner than whenever they're going to get fixed. And that's not to say that I expect everything to get instantly fixed by the team. Obviously, the team's pretty understaffed right now. They only have one full-time designer, and that's more of a new guy who's just doing his job. He's not going above and beyond, and I shouldn't expect him to go above and beyond. But at the same time, it's showing how they only have one full-time designer. They do have a few other full-time people, I think, but they're not, designers per se. And they do have a part-time designer, Stormbringer, who does pretty good work on the game, I'd say. Overall, at the end of the day, I just want to give you a bit more of a glimpse into how things work. If you couldn't already tell, I'm going to be rambling a bit, so if you want to skip around, there should be timestamps in the description. So without further ado, let's get into it. Let's talk about ship combat. So as you probably already know, if you've ever played the game, ship combat sucks. That's really putting it lightly. Ship combat amounts to 4 buttons, and you keep pressing them. So you have the utility button, where you press it and it gives you a buff. And then you have your 2 damage powers, which deal damage to the enemy ship. And then you have your heal power for when you occasionally get low on health. And you just keep spamming these until you win the fight. And, the simplicity isn't necessarily a bad thing. The problem is that it takes forever to actually finish a fight. And it's just not engaging. It's just not engaging at all. There's a reason why when people come across ship quests in the main quest line that says, sink 5 ships, or even just 4 ships, or maybe even just 3, depending on if it's defeat and collect or not, they're going to quit the game. And whether or not that's temporary or permanent, I couldn't tell you. But I think it's pretty obvious to say that ship combat, being how it is a huge it's a huge factor of why people quit the game, honestly. Which is why it's kind of bizarre to me when they did a first-time user experience update in recent years. And for some reason, they decided that they would just touch the beginning of the game that they've already touched a million times over before, instead of touching the actual obvious problem that people are quitting over. I don't really get that, but, And there are some problems with that first-time user experience update where they made a plot element just non-existent. It doesn't make sense anymore. and then you skip over level 3, I think, entirely. So you go from level 2 to level 4. Okay, I'm not going to ramble too much about the big issues of the first-time user experience update they did. Instead, let's just talk about ship combat like I was going to. So, problem is, how do you fix ship combat without completely overhauling it? Because to overhaul it, they would need, actual programmers to go in and implement the new design. And we all know they don't have the resources to do that right now. So what do you do? Well, there's actually a lot of things they could do, because basically how ships work is each ship defines their own kind of speed and turning and acceleration rates, but the actual health and damage and so on is actually determined by a thing called the ship combat class. And there are actually very few of these. The player only has one class for ships, at least. And this class defines attributes such as health and dodge and such. And basically think of a graph where you have points on that graph and you draw lines, curves between them. This is what the game's doing, basically. The designers define certain points on the graph, and then the game calculates a curve, lines, going from each point. And that's how each ship gets their stats. And this is based on level, of course. So what they could do is they could adjust health. I think that's the obvious one. They could adjust damage so that you're doing more damage. Or there's actually an unused stat that they don't really... Actually, they do talk about it once in the player guide that nobody ever reads. They talk about a stat called ship firing rate. And this stat is actually never used like on items in-game. So it doesn't really make sense why it was mentioned on there. Maybe once upon a time there were items that adjusted your ship firing rates, but that's no longer the case. These days, it's pretty much unused as far as I'm aware, at least in terms of items. So right now, you can see the cooldowns here. The ship firing rate actually affects those cooldowns and how long or how short they are. And it doesn't just affect these. Firing rate also affects how fast your ship's broadside cannons actually fire. So if I go up to this ship, you're going to see the ship automatically fires at them, right? I don't even have to do anything. It's going to start automatically firing, and that's based on the ship firing rate. I'm not sure what exactly it's set to. I think it looks like it's about 5 seconds, or maybe a little longer than that. But obviously, as it is, ship combat is pretty slow. I'm higher level than these guys by 8 levels, so it's going to go noticeably faster, be a bit more tolerable. But when you're actually questing through the game, this is not going to be very fun. And in a lot of cases, you're not even going to be able to do it through your ship alone, because it's just not well designed to where you would actually be able to keep up with enemy ship levels. So more than likely, you're just going to get boarded, or you're going to have to board the enemy ship either way. I guess it's kind of redundant to say that, but the point is that ship combat's very slow. And there's a multitude of ways they could fix this. But one way I'm thinking about is ship firing rates. So let me change this and show you how that looks like. So here you can see the ship combat class, as I was talking about earlier. And as you can see, this is how they works. They set the values, and there's a curve that they can adjust that, so the curve isn't just, well, I'm not entirely sure how that works. I'm guessing by default it's like either a straight line, or they can actually have it curve in a more different way. I don't know the technicality of that, but point is that this is how they set the attributes, the stat points on classes. And this is the same case for players, by the way. Players also have classes. So Witch Doctor has their own class like this. Buccaneer has their own class like this. So that's how that works. But what we're going to change here is we can see the ship firing rate. What we're going to change it to is right now it's at a value of 100. And that's just the default rate where it'll be the normal cooldowns and everything. What I'm going to do is I'm going to change it to 150. So that means the cooldowns are going to be 50% faster, and your broadside cannons are going to fire 50% faster. So let's see what that actually looks like in game. We're back in the game, and you can see that the cooldowns have been decreased. And the funny little side effect of this is that the GUI isn't really intended to handle decimal points. So it's just going to be not very clean looking. So, you know, maybe they would have to adjust that. But this is, again, just one option. They don't have to choose firing rate. They could nerf health for the enemy ships. They could, you know, increase the damage for players. There's a lot of things they could just do otherwise that would be just as simple to change. But the point is that this is one of those changes they could make that would just speed up combat. Because now you can see that the ship powers are going faster. My player ship is shooting faster. Keep in mind, this doesn't affect the enemy ships. Maybe it'd be fair to affect them too. But it's going quite a bit faster. I'm pretty sure this was taking kinda long. And now it's been over... well, it's over in just... I'm not even sure how long that is, probably less than a minute. Or maybe just a minute at most. So, that's one way that they could go about making ship combat more bearable. Besides, you know, just the simple fact that they need to go through the quests that still ask for way too many ships to be sunk. Because it's just ridiculous to ask the player, hey, go sink 10 ships, go sink 5 ships even. That's just way too much. At least in the current state that the game is in. If you want players to sink 10 ships, then I think you're going to have to increase... you're going to have to at least double the rate of ship combat as it is, for that to be bearable. And even then, that's not really great. So, that's just one example. Now I'm going to talk about the ships themselves. So, you may have noticed that although there are 3 different weight classes to ships, these weight classes, light, medium, heavy, and then this ship currently is a heavy ship. It's a galleon. There's actually no difference between any of these ships. The only factor that matters in terms of a ship's stats is the level. And this is for all kinds of stats, not just, you know, oh, damage and whatnot. No, it's actually about the speed too. The speed doesn't change between the weight classes. To clarify, the speed of a ship doesn't depend on the level either. Instead, per ship, the speed and acceleration and turning speed, that's all set individually per ship. And in most cases, I've gone through pretty much all of the ships, and the only difference that they ever make between the ships is a very slight difference in acceleration. So a skiff will accelerate faster than a galleon, faster than a frigate, and you can extrapolate from that. But that's the only difference. There's no difference otherwise. And, you know, this isn't really encouraging you to use the other kinds of ships. Why would I ever want to use, for example, a skiff, you know? There's no point. There's no point to use a skiff over a galleon. There's no point to use a frigate over a skiff or a galleon. It's just, none of it matters. And I just don't think that's very good design in the first place either. It's a lot like ship combat. So what I think they should do is, I think they should split up each weight class into its own actual class. So here we're looking at the file of the Spiral Galleon from Marleybone. And as you can see, they set the speed and acceleration through here. They use kind of weirdly technical terms. I don't know why, honestly, but to summarize, the impulse is the acceleration. The boost stuff, that's just the fuel and how that works. Angular velocity is how fast the ship turns. Max impulse velocity is the maximum speed that the ship can go at. Minimum velocity is the minimum speed the ship can go at. And then I'm not sure what these are for. I assume because, you know, it's sine, it's probably, maybe it's affecting like the acceleration and making it not linear. I'm not sure about that. I've tested it. It doesn't really seem to do anything, so putting that aside. Terminal velocity, I assumed this would do something, but I've messed with it and it doesn't seem to do anything. So yeah, basically the important ones are minimum velocity, and maximum velocity, the impulse, which is the acceleration, and then the angular velocity, which is the turning speed. I think what would make sense is if they go through the galleons, the skiffs, the frigates, and for each of them, based on their weight class, they adjust the maximum speed, the minimum speed, and make it so that skiffs just go faster by default. So going back to what I was saying, they could also separate the weight classes into their own actual classes with different stats. So this is the visual label. I'm pretty sure it doesn't do anything as far as I've tested. And then here's the ship combat class ID. This is just pointing towards the normal player ship combat class, because all the ships use that one specific class for the players. And what they could do is they could split it up into 3 classes, and they could go through and change the class on the appropriate ships and have it so that they have different stats based on their weight class. So, for example, the heavy class could have more health, it could maybe deal more damage. The medium class, the frigates, they could have, you know, maybe more accuracy. Maybe they could have maybe higher firing rate by default. And then for the skiffs, you could have them with higher dodge than normal because they're small, they're light, they're fast. It would make sense. Overall, there's just a lot of ways they could approach that and make ship combat and just ships in general more interesting. So overall, you know, if you're looking at it after actually inspecting how all of these things work, ships are really underdeveloped for some reason, to where there's not even any differences between them. And that's very unusual for, you know, any kind of ship system, because there's supposed to be actual differences between, you know, the heavy ships and the light ships. So, I'm here in Tartarus to talk about two issues. First one being that if you try to teleport to the life fountain, it's not going to send you to the right place. And this also applies to, if you're defeated in battle, you're supposed to spawn next to the life fountain, right? And the life fountain is, it's not around here. But if you try to go there, it's going to send you here. And the weird thing about it is, previously it was sending you to a completely different area, like way over somewhere else. But that still wasn't the life fountain. So you might be wondering, well, how come they haven't fixed it? Is this some kind of like complicated issue? And I'm here to tell you that it's actually not at all complicated. So let me show you. So here I am in the Tartarus file, the game data file, where they define basically all of the objects and various other attributes of the zone. And one thing they have is the location list. So basically they define a list of coordinates, and these are various locations that they can use for when you enter and exit a zone. So for example, you can see from Death's Office, that's at this location, XYZ, and it'll face you a certain direction when you go to that this specific location. They use that for, when you exit Death's Office, they will put you in this exact location to make it obvious, hey, you just exited Death's Office, right? It's very straightforward. So the problem with the life fountain is that they haven't set up a location for the life fountain. You see, what they normally do is they have, let's just say, for example, they have this. And what they do is they call it home, and they set up a bunch of these, and they have it all around the life fountain, coordinates around the life fountain, so that you can spawn in various places around the life fountain. And they just happen to use the location name home for this, just so you know. And there wasn't any location for that here. So all they have to do is they have to create the location, and they have to set the name to home, and they have to set the location correctly, as well as the direction. And they're going to have to make a few of these, at least, if they want it to be, set up in the same way that other life fountains around the game are, where you can spawn in various locations around the life fountain. So let me show you what that looks like. So here we are back in the game after we've made an addition to have the life fountain location. And so when we use the life fountain teleport button now, we will actually be teleported to the right location. And it's right next to the life fountain. That's all there is to it. I'm not sure why they haven't done that yet, but yeah, that is how simple it is. It's very simple. The next issue I'm going to talk about is the collision of Tartarus. So the collision is referring to, where the player's walking, walking into walls and stuff. A problem with Tartarus is that the collision is not very good. So, yeah, it's been like this. So here's a visualization of the the collision. So you can see the collision is not accurate at all. Not at all. It's very much all over the place with, there's no collision to block the player's camera from going through the walls. In some cases, they can just go straight through the walls. That's a problem. So I think this is an issue with the process. So to explain that, basically, they have this exact same zone in Wizard, and it has correct collision. Like you don't just walk into walls and phase out of them. Your camera will not go out of bounds. No, it's set up completely fine. So I think the problem is, for some reason, they decided that they had to recreate the collision from the ground up. And you know, in a lot of cases, it's not easy to port over a zone from Wizard. And I mean, I think maybe that's a bit too much of a stretch. It's more that the games, they do things extremely similarly, but they implement it just slightly differently. And I think they've talked about this on stream, by the way, where, yeah, it's the same thing, but they do it slightly differently. However, collision is actually implemented in the exact same way. You can copy paste it straight over from Wizard to Pirate, and it will work perfectly fine. The only issue would be if a material is using, like if a ground is using a material that the game doesn't support, it doesn't have footstep sounds for. Because each material, for example, if you're walking on stone, it's going to have a stone footstep sound. I think for Pirate, I don't think there's footstep sounds for ice. I'm not sure about any other materials. But the point is that functionally, they can just copy-paste collision from Wizard and it'll work just fine, other than maybe footsteps in certain places. So let me show you what that looks like when I copy-paste the Wizard 101 Tartarus Collision over. So here we are back in the game, and as you can see now, the collision looks a lot more proper. So if I try to walk into the walls, look, perfectly fine. The camera's not going to phase out. It's very accurate. So, like I said, I don't really know why they don't do this. I think it would make a lot of sense if they did. It'd save them a lot of heartache, because I'm sure they probably did have to, you know, make all this new collision that doesn't work for some reason. I really don't get what's going on there, but something with the process there needs to be evaluated, and they need to just copy paste the collision over if it's an existing area from Wizard. Now I'd like to take a shot at reworking the Magnificent 7. So in a recent patch, they actually did rework a few companions based on community polls regarding different sets, and one of those sets was the Magnificent 7. And the companion who won that is Bat Masterson. He got reworked. And I really like what Stormbringer did with him, actually. Countering hidden units, because hidden units honestly don't have that many counters. So I'd say overall, Bat Masterson's pretty good now. I like it a lot. Bloodsucker, everything. Just makes perfect sense. And while Stormbringer hasn't described his thought process going into this yet, you know, it's kind of funny, since if you go through the puppet show, it'll say that Bat Masterson's a better tracker than a Bloodhound. So I assume there's actually some inspiration there from the actual lore, which I like a lot. That's really cool. And obviously Bloodsucker, since he's a vampire. Putting that aside, there's also the other companions here to take a look at. Yes. Wild Bill Peacock, he starts with Burst Fire, and in the puppet show they say he's the best shot with a rifle there ever was. Which, guys, he has a pistol. You gave him a pistol. He doesn't have a rifle. But, putting that aside, pretty obvious. He's supposed to be a chainer unit. Very straightforward. Buffalo Bill, he starts with Overwatch. In the puppet show, he's saying that he's stronger than an ox, meaner than a mountain lion. So there's some kind of strength component to him, which is interesting for a musketeer. Jane Canary starts with True Grit, and for the puppet show, could snipe a silver dollar at 50 yards, easy. Or, well, bullseye. Same thing as snipe. Point is, she's supposed to be a sniper. Now, I feel the starting epics here are kind of strange, because why does he start with Overwatch, and then Jane starts with True Grit? Like, did they accidentally swap these? Because Jane's supposed to be a sniper, and then Buffalo Bill is supposed to be strong, so hey, wouldn't he have True Grit? Jane's a sniper, wouldn't she have Overwatch? So, I would swap those. Billy the Kid starts with Quick Draw. He's fast and crazy, so perfectly suited right now. Know what direction to take him in. Doc Holliday is the vaguest one here, though. What does he do? So, in the puppet show, they say he laughs death in the face, and, you know, there's more than a few ways to interpret that. But the way I'm going to be interpreting him is he laughs death in the face. So I'm thinking that means he's unfazed by intimidation and things. So I was thinking I'd give him an epic talent where at the end of every round his debuffs are purged. But, you know, that's a little bit powerful. You just get a free debuff purge at the end of every round. I mean, maybe that's okay, but I was thinking I'd also balance that out by having it purge the buffs as well. But, well, yeah, I'm honestly not sure here, because, you know, if it's just him being affected by at the end of every round, you know, the debuff gets purged. That's kind of fair. It's just him being affected by this. And if it's at the end of every round, that means you can apply a debuff to him, and it's still going to do something for at least one round. Or, I mean, it depends on the round ordering, but I think that would still have an effect. But you get the point. All of them start with Musketeer's Mastery. Or, well, I think they get Musketeer's Mastery, which, yeah, it's the same across the board, other than Bat Masterson, since he's the weird exception. But I want to diversify them in more unique ways to their identity. And Doc Holliday's is just... the idea I have for him is just one of those. I was thinking for the other ones they should also get their own unique spin. Like Buffalo Bill, he should get something going on with strength. Maybe he's like an anti-Buccaneer unit. Or maybe he also plays into Buccaneer, so I don't know. Something like that. Something to do with his strength. Because for someone touted as being stronger than an ox, he doesn't have very high strength, as you can see. So, you know, maybe change that. That could be interesting. Make a bit more sense. Jane being a sniper, Billy being fast, Wild Bill Peacock he's just being a good chainer unit. That's pretty straightforward. So yeah, let's get into the technical details, at least for Doc Holliday's implementation here. So I've decided I'm going to call the new talent Laugh It Off. So I've created a new talent with that file name. And what I've done is I copy-pasted Bat Masterson's Bloodhound talent to use that as a simple base. So you can see this has 3 ranks. I'm going to delete the 2 ranks because I just want 1. I'm going to change the max rank to 1, and then I would change the name here to Laugh It Off. And then the template ID, basically every, I guess you could say, object in the game has a template ID, and it has to be unique, or else you're going to run into a collision, and the game's not going to like that. It's going to crash. At least in Pirate it will. In Wizard it's a bit more tolerating of that, but in Pirate's a lot more strict about that, and it will the game will literally just crash. So yeah, I have to change this to something else. I'll just add like a couple numbers and it should work just fine. Obviously, in an official environment, they're actually handling all of the template IDs. They're making sure that there's no duplicates. But for the sake of demonstration, I'm just going to do a random number here. Okay. And then here we have the display name, so that determines what name's being displayed. We have the description. Obviously, that's the description. And where that leads to is the locale, where they have a list with a bunch of entries. And when it says, for example, talents, it's going to go to the talents file in that locale. And then it's going to look for the 226 entry. And under the 226 entry will be the text just Bloodhound, right? So we're going to go into the locale and create our own entries for this new talent. And we're also going to create a new icon. I'll actually show how that goes once I get around to it. And then we also need to still create the new game effect, which basically the game effect handles the actual logic of how the talent works in combat. So here we are in the talents locale. And you can see the format here is basically, you see this top number, you go through a new line, and then you have the actual text of the entry. So we're going to create a new entry. This will be 229. And we are going to call it Laugh It Off. And then here we are in the ability descriptions, which we will create a new one, 556. And let me think about how to word this. So I'm going to put at the end of each turn, remove all, and I'm going to put the debuff icon, which is the red arrow that you see in game. You'll see what this looks like in game, but I think that's good enough. So let's change the display name of our epic talent to the new entry, and then the description to the new entry for that as well. Then we're going to make sure that that's consistent across the ranks. And before I deal with the icon, I'm going to deal with the game effect logic first. So let's get to that. I've made the new game effects file, which is labeled modification. They have various different internal labels for what each kind of talent is. Like there's proc, there's attack, and I decided to base this off of Sneaky Sneaky, since that's a very similar effect. So let's do the basics. We'll change the name internally. We'll reuse the new entry for the display name. I'm going to change the template ID to something else, just for demonstration. So currently it's still having the same effect as Sneaky Sneaky. I'm going to change it to the effect that we want, which the effect that we want is basically what Dispel Magic does. So I'm going to copy paste Dispel Magic here. And that should work perfectly fine. Now we're going back to Laugh It Off to change the game effect from the placeholder Bloodhound effect to the actual new effect. And now it should function perfectly fine. And all that's left to do is handle the icon. Now I'm going to make the icon. I'm going to base this off of the sent icon, just to make sure I have the right resolution and everything. I'll be using GIMP for this, since that's what I'm familiar with. But just a note, the KingsDAO artists do use Photoshop, but this will work just fine. I did not find any icons that I could reuse, but I will be reusing some puppet show art, since there's actually a lot of it, and there's one that perfectly fits this icon. So let's get to it. Alright, maybe not the best job I've ever done, but I'm satisfied with it. So I'll export this as a DDS, which is what they use, or they use JPF as well, but yeah, I mean, it's kind of pointless to talk about that. Either way, I'll get this in game and show you what it looks like. Before I do that, I want to show you how I go about adding this talent to Holliday. So, a companion is comprised of visual behavior, which just defines, like, you know, what the companion looks like, the animations, everything in that regard. And then we have the actual unit behavior template, where they define pretty much everything. Where, okay, I didn't know that he does magical damage. Okay, the more you know. Apparently he does that. Putting that aside though, we have to go down to talent behavior, where we will add the new talent. So I'm going to just copy paste this, do this, and just so you know, templates are talents and such that are baked into the companion. You don't have to train them, and then trained means that you have to actually train that. So yeah, that's how that works. So what we're going to do is we're going to change this talent ID to the new talent we just made, that one's ID. So let's change it, and there we go. That should be all there is to that. So let's go in game and see what it looks like. So we're back in game, and I did adjust the text a little because I thought it wasn't clear enough about what it was doing. But as you can see, it looks pretty good. Laugh it off. At the end of each turn, remove all debuffs from self. And yeah, this should be fully functional as well. I don't see any reason why it wouldn't. It works exactly the same as Dispel Magic. So here we are back in Holiday's file to make more adjustments. And one adjustment I'm going to make is give him another epic point. And the reason why I'm doing that is because right now he only has 5 epic points. And Stormbringer gave Bat Masterson 6 epic points. So I think it's completely fair to have the other Magnificent 7 companions also have 6 epic points at this tier. And keep in mind, they do get one more promotion that's unreleased right now, but eventually they will get a new promotion. So I guess at that point they'd have 7 epic points. Let's take a look at Duck's epics. You might notice these are just IDs, so it's not clear what these epics are pertaining to. It's a lot easier on King's side since they have tools that just automatically show it. Thankfully, I can use a little developer utility in-game where if the game thinks you're a developer, it shows you the IDs for every item and epic. You might have already noticed that. So I'll get the IDs through this way, and I'll tell you what they are. So I thought about giving Duck Holliday Quick Draw 2, but there's already Billy the Kid. I think I'll do that for Billy, but for Duck, it should be something else. So I was thinking I would give him a default rank of True Grit, because that would go along with his whole, you know, he's unfazed by death, he laughs death in the face. It kind of goes with the theme there. So, I mean, again, it's not, I'm still not sure exactly how to handle him, so I think this would work, though. Now I'm going to copy paste this and change it to True Grit. I know this is True Grit, so I'll copy paste that in, and now he has a default rank of True Grit 1. As for boosting his actual epics, Bat Masterson was given rank 4 epics of 2 certain ones, so I'm going to do the same thing here. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to make it so he can get True Grit 4 as well as Quick Draw 4. So we can see Quick Draw is this one, change that to 4, and then we can see True Grit's this one, we change that to 4, and there we go. So now in game we can see that he now starts with an extra rank of True Grit, and I can raise that to, let's just say, let's do True Grit. And he can get True Grit 4, as you can see. Oh wow, you can actually do that. I guess in this case you could give him True Grit 4 and Quick Draw 4. Not something I would do, but you know, it's an option. So yeah. So now for the finishing touches, I am thinking I'm going to give him a few more powers instead of just Musketeer's Mastery. And I was thinking to go along with his whole laugh it off shtick. Here, this only lets him deal with his own debuffs. I was thinking he could also have a way to get rid of buffs, but, you know, it's already focused mainly on himself, so I was thinking it would have to be an active power. It's not going to be anything new or custom, so I am thinking I'm going to give him Purge Magic. And then, besides that, I was thinking I could just give him a Super Strike. I don't think there is anything else that would be, you know, very fitting, honestly, so I mean, I think a Super Strike would be fair enough. So here, I'm going to copy-paste this power 2 times, and then we're going to replace the IDs with the respective power IDs. So Magic Purge, we can see is this ID. We will put that in. Yeah, I think I'll put it in as the 3rd slot. We go for the unit power range crit. Yes, units do have, companions I should say, do have a unique critical power. I'm not sure why, but yeah. Alright, and now we've got that. Let's go in game and see how it looks. Alright, here we are in game, and as you can see, he now has Purge Magic and Super Strike. So I would say that's about it for his rework. I mean, maybe he could adjust his stats further, give like a bonus to some, but I mean, I think overall it's pretty alright. I'm not even sure what stat I would buff, so I'm pretty satisfied with this. I think that's going to cut it for this rework in this video. I was going to do all the Magnificent 7, but I realized that this is taking a lot longer now that I'm having to verbally narrate all of this, so if you want to see more of that, just let me know, because I'm thinking about doing more videos like this. And if you have any other ideas that would not require new code, then you can just let me know in the comments. I will probably reiterate this at the end of the video, but yeah. So I'm going to show how to fix a certain issue with the camera in combat that they've had recently in new content. I'm going to be doing this in my own fan-made content from the Darkmoor video that was a few years ago. Crazy, it's a few years ago, by the way. But yeah, I'm going to show you what the issue is. Alright? Let's see what the problem is.
Protect me, Metal Man! Order received. Now on standby.
So, as you can see, there's a huge pillar in the way, and I can't see anything. And you will have seen, if you've played recently, issues like that in the zigzag content, where you cannot see what's going on because the camera is just behind a wall. So, let's go into the Mojo viewer and see how do they fix that issue. So here we are in the Mojo viewer. I'm using the scope for this. So we can see the pillars in question. So you might be wondering what the solution is. Well, if you've gone through a lot of pirate content, you might have noticed that in combat, they will basically make certain objects in the area invisible. And you might be thinking, well, maybe this is like a super advanced feature. Actually, it's very straightforward. I'm assuming they just forgot how to do this, but, well, here's how you do it. So what they need to do is they need to do this. They need to add col underscore to each object name here, basically, mesh. And it will call it in combat. That's what the name is for. Let's make sure we get everything. Well, okay. That might be a bit more annoying than I thought, but okay, well, let's just do the pillars for now, and let's see what that looks like in game. So here I am, back in the zone. Now let's see what happens this time. As you can see, the pillars have disappeared.
Protect me, Metal Man! Order received. Now on standby.
And it's not going to get in the way. Of course, I do have the floating sconces, but that would just take a little bit of time to make disappear. Otherwise, the issue's fixed, and that's all there is to it. So, for Zigzag, all they need to do is go into their own Mojo viewer and just tag like specific walls to disappear during combat, and it would be fine. So, yeah. Here's an issue with quick adjust grants, specifically with the Valencia Part 2 gear. I saw this bug reported in the Discord. So we have normal quick adjust rank epic, granted by my pet, has all the ranks perfectly fine. But I have 2 pieces from Valencia Part 2 equipped. And you can see these are taking up a different slot. And it only has 3 ranks. So it's considered to be completely different from this other one. And you might be wondering, well, why is that? Well, it's a different version of the same talent. And if you look, you can see this one's 656,575. This one is 656,573. So that confirms it is a different version if it wasn't obvious. And to answer why this exists, when this one's the obvious correct one, I don't know. I've looked into it, and I mean, if you go to my pad, it has quick adjust 1. It's using the correct epic, so I'm not even sure. It might just be that those epics have been kind of just deprecated. Like, there's versions of the epics that have been deprecated, and sometimes they accidentally use them, but I can't confirm that for sure, so I'm not sure. Maybe some enemies use it or something, but what they need to do is they need to go into the XMLs, the files for these specific items, and there's more of them, by the way. It's not just these. There's more of them in Valencia Part 2. And they need to change the grants to actually give the right epic. Now here's a problem that I have been suffering with for over a decade, and that is the Mojo Flow icons. Not to even mention how broken the actual power is. I'll leave that rant for after I explain this, but the icons, you might notice they're missing transparency. You might say, well, the first icon, the first tier, actually has a transparent icon. Well, it wasn't always like that. That was actually only recently fixed in the most recent patch as of today. Which is, the patch was like, I think a week or 2 ago, something like that, maybe. But the point is that this has been around for over 10 years. Ever since they've introduced Mojo Flow, the icons have not been transparent, and they only just fixed the first tier, but they didn't fix these. And I don't think I need to really explain this too much, but it is extremely simple to just remove the white outline in a photo image editor, like Photoshop, GIMP, whatever. And they re-export it, and it's fine. I mean, you can see they did it just fine with the first tier. Why did they skip the second and third tier? I couldn't tell you. Maybe they were in a rush, but yeah. This is an easy fix. I don't think I even really need to show how that's done. So let me instead take my time to explain how this power is broken. So, Mojo Flow lets you, with this power specifically, lets you double the spell power of a unit. And there's also the 50% and 25% ones. But the point is, you can do this, and there's no drawback. You can do this to your entire team, and it's crazy because a lot of powers are based off of spell power. So, for example, there would be a power that says, okay, deal 3 times your spell power. So you can imagine that this results in insane amounts of damage. This is like if you had... Imagine a weapon power equivalent. That would be ridiculous. The only reason this is tolerable is because, well, you're only casting 1 power per turn. You're not chaining multiple hits. Like, okay, fair enough. But this is still way too broken. All of the issues in recent... Not really even recent, honestly. It's more like the past decade. All those issues are caused by Mojo Flow for the most part. So, you might have heard of Blood Flames from the Blood Jacket. Well, that's only doing so much, and it was only such an issue because of Mojo Flow. Otherwise, people wouldn't have really cared about it. But because Mojo Flow exists, it causes the issue, and it's going to continue causing more issues so long as it exists in this state. And I've seen people say, well, you know, if you nerf Mojo Flow, like, too heavily, then Witch Doctor's gonna become useless. Well, doesn't that kind of indicate a problem there with Witch Doctor themselves? It just means Witch Doctor, as a class, is not balanced well. A class should not be hinging entirely on these... like 1 or 2 or 3 powers, and it's on a companion. It's not even a normal power that the player gets. It's a companion. That means Witch Doctors, unless you are actually good at the game and you're skilled and you can do a lot of niche tactics and such, let's be honest, the average player, they need to have Old Scratch in their party. That means he's always taking up a slot in their party if they're a Witch Doctor. And to be fair, this isn't exclusive to Witch Doctor. I think Privateers often run Old Scratch. Musketeers often run Old Scratch because their bombs are based off of spell power for some reason. Don't ask me why that's the case. I think their bombs should be based off of weapon power, but putting that aside, the point is that this power is causing a lot of issues. So I think what they should do is they should nerf it. They shouldn't just class lock it or something, because that's not solving the issue. The issue is that Witch Doctor just isn't balanced well enough. It should not be relying entirely on this 1 power. If your class falls apart the moment that you remove a single power, there's something wrong with the class. None of the other classes are going to fall apart if you remove a power. Like, oh, you Musketeer, you remove their bombs, they're still going to be pretty good. Buccaneer, you remove their charge, they're still going to be pretty good. Swashbuckler, you remove their hides, they'll be severely nerfed, but they'll still be pretty good, to be honest. And in recent content, everybody has a First Strike 3 anyway, so oftentimes the enemies will just ignore your hide and it won't matter, so yeah, it might as well effectively already be that way. So I'm hoping that they finally do touch upon this and nerf Mojo Flow. if anyone's watching this, Stormbringer or whoever, please actually adjust it, because, you know, this is a problem. But I do understand the argument that if they nerf this, they need to rework the entire class. You know, I kind of get that. I think what they could do as a temporary measure is just specifically buff certain individual powers of Witch Doctor's arsenal so that they deal more damage by default. But overall, Witch Doctor as a class just needs a rework because, you know, their epics, their basic attacks, it's not really synergizing with their powers. Like, you know, if I give Old Scratch any of these epics, like, when are these ever going to be coming into play other than Mojo Blast? Never really, because it's just not good for a Witch Doctor to chain. Not really. And then they also feel like they miss more often by default. I can't really tell you if that's the case because I've looked into it and I haven't seen any indication that they should be missing more. Like, they have the exact same percentages and everything as the other classes, but putting that aside, it's just kind of weird how Witch Doctors are focused on a power playstyle, and then they have all these epics that they don't really do anything with. There's no synergy between the epics and the powers. You see, once upon a time, it used to be that these epics could trigger if you're using a power. So if you Mojo Stormed, or maybe not Mojo Storm, but if you Ghost Wailed or something, a single target power on an enemy, it might trigger Mojo Echo. So to be honest with you, I think they should bring back that functionality. I think that would help a lot if the epics could trigger off the powers that the Witch Doctors have. Just some kind of synergy needs to be added, I think. So, rant over. Thanks for listening to that. Here's our last issue. You might have already noticed that if you've ever played Pirate before, but Eagilles has the wrong name, and I think they also messed with his visuals. You might be wondering how this happened. It's because in the Tartarus update, they added an Eagilles shade fight, but I guess the new designer didn't really understand how to handle the development, because what he did was he just modified the existing Eagilles. The problem is, you already encountered this guy, and they overwrote his name with Eagilles Shade. So now, some random player is gonna come up, quest through Aquila, Eagilles Shade, and then he has like the different colors. Why does he look like that? Why does he have that name? Doesn't make any sense. I've already showed you the locale entries before. All they did was they overwrote the entry of Eagilles with this new name. What they need to do is they need to revert those changes so that Eagilles here works properly, and then they need to go into Tartarus and ensure that the Eagilles Shade there has his own, unique entries, unique files, because it shouldn't just be reusing the same one from Aquila. This is a different Eagilles. You can't just overwrite it. I mean, yeah, I don't think there's really much more to say about that, but, yeah, that's how it is. And there's been a lot of issues in recent updates, and a lot of the main point of this video really was to show off that these issues aren't difficult to deal with. I mean, they're overall very simple on average. Some of these issues also weren't even introduced in the last few updates. They were existing ever since 1C Part 2, maybe even before that, like the Mojo Flow one. So it's more just that they're not fixing the issues, they're not taking the time to do so, and it's a little concerning as they keep going forward, adding new updates. It's great we're getting new content, but if they keep adding more and more buggy updates and they just never fix any of the old issues, or at least not enough of them, it's going to keep stacking up to where a new player is going to play through Pirate and they're going to be wondering why there are so many issues and inconsistencies. How is the game ever like this? Well, it's because it wasn't like this. Eagilles didn't always have the wrong name. You know, he used to look and have the right name and everything. So I'm really hoping that they take more time, maybe get a bigger team. I'm hoping. I understand it's not just as easy as, hey, let's get more people. But, you know, it's been a few years, and I was hoping to see more than just one full-time designer by now. But that's still all we have. And, you know, I think, I mean, going more into details, Stormbringer as a part-time designer, he mainly works on Wiz, but he's allowed to work part-time on Pirate. And, I mean, it used to be that he wasn't even really given time to work on Pirate, actually. It's more just, if he has the free time, he can work on Pirate. But now he does, I think he did say he gets slated time for Pirate. Probably not that much, but it's slated time. I honestly just wish they would convert him over to a full-time designer on Pirate, honestly. I mean, it's clear he has a lot of passion for the game. He knows a lot about the game. He was a player. He was making guides for Final Bastion, or maybe it was Duelist 101 back in the day. Point is that he has a lot of knowledge and just cares about the game. So, yeah, if there's one thing I can hope for, it would be that he can be full-time on Pirate, because that would be a really good thing. He could do more rapid reworks and everything. And I think overall you'd see the quality go up quite noticeably. You know, it's pretty easy for the quality of these updates to go up by simply adding one more full-time designer. I genuinely think that would be a huge boon to the game. But yeah, I've already shown a lot in this video. If you have any suggestions for things I should look at or add or something like that, again, nothing too crazy, but just as long as it doesn't require new code necessarily, then let me know in the comments and I maybe can do it. Because Pirate is a very modular game. It is the most modular game that I've handled, honestly, and I've gone through a lot of games. And Pirate is very much built like, it's like building blocks, or they've actually described it on stream before as Legos. And that's really what it is at the end of the day. You saw the files I showed you. A lot of this can just be done by a single guy as a designer without adding any new assets, coding in anything, because these are just files you can edit with Notepad or whatever. And yeah, they will sometimes need to reuse assets and such, but they have a lot of assets already. They could reuse assets from Wizard, and there's also a lot of Pirate assets that they really should consider using, like the old islands they have for Krokotopia, which I really don't get why they didn't use those instead of Zigzag. And I mean, this video is going to get really long if I keep ranting about Zigzag, but Zigzag in particular was a disaster, honestly. And I do think it is actually the worst update that they've ever released. I know that might sound really brutal and over the top, but I was just that disappointed by that. Even more so than Valencia Part 2, honestly. Valencia Part 2 It was bad, but it did still have some positive aspects going for it. Zigzag, not very many, because it's full of red herrings in terms of the story. Like, oh, the Armada's back, oh, Queen's here, and then it's not actually Queen. And then also, oh, here's Draconians you have to fight suddenly, out of nowhere. And then there's an excuse about how you can't go to Krakatopia yourself because your Windstone can't manage the journey, as if it's gonna break. I mean, that might sound reasonable from, a glance perspective, but the Windstones, lore-wise, were built by the Aquilan Immortals. So it was forged by, Hephaestus Coppersmith himself, like the god of forging. It's just a dumb excuse because I wouldn't expect these Windstones to break so easily. And, that kind of has implications, like you can't just say it's gonna break when we only ever get these single Windstones. And then how are you going to actually deal with it when the time comes? Like, couldn't you have just said, well, we can't go to Krakatopia because there's blockades, Captain, or there are plenty of other excuses they could have used without making it a problem in the future. Okay. Less ranting about lore and more about the actual technical details. So, the problem with the execution of Zigzag, mainly for me, is that they were doing an entire, Krakatopia expansion for Wizard at the same time. They made Selenopolis, and then they HDified all of the existing Krakatopia areas. And yet, in Zigzag, we don't see any of those assets except for one enemy. That was Amit? Is that how you pronounce it? But, that's it. That's the only one. And it just feels very badly coordinated. Why didn't they market both of them at the same time? Like, hey, we're doing a Krakatopia update for both games. Why didn't they use the assets for Wizard101 Selenopolis and the HD Krakatopia for the new Pirate Krakatopia update, More than just the Amit enemy. I don't understand that. That could have really helped them out in terms of resources, because the resources would have been all handled by Wizard, and then you just port it over to Pirate. But that's not what happened. I mean, overall, it was just really bad, especially when it was hyped up that, oh, we're going to Krakatopia. That this is another red herring, by the way, where, oh, you'd expect to fight some, Crocs there, or Manders even. No, you don't. You don't. There are no Crocs that you fight. And this is even more frustrating when you realize that there are unreleased Krakatopia enemies in the files. Yeah, they're not necessarily finished, but, they could have taken the time to work on those and get those functional. And they actually kind of did in another sense, because they added a Crocomummy pet. Actually, let me get it out right now. As you can see, they actually made a Crocomummy pet, and they did entirely new animations for this, even though they already have an unreleased Crocomummy with existing animations. So, not only did the update not have any Croc enemies, including Crocomummies, they made a Crocomummy pet with combat animations. They're very polished. There's multiple attack animations even, which they don't normally do for a mob these days, since that's kind of resource intensive. And it's just a pet. They never actually have you fight Crocs in Croc. So, yeah, it's just overall a mismanagement of resources on a very high scale that I was really baffled by. And I'm still just... I just don't get it. I still don't get it. I'm really hoping that going forward they manage the resources more, just, they need to manage the resources better in general. And that includes old assets and new assets alike. And, you know, considering both games, what's going on at the same time, you know, if they can take assets from the other game, if need be. Yeah. Okay, well, I think I've probably ranted enough for this video. I do all this because I love the game. It is honestly my favorite game of all time. I'm not joking about that. It's really special to me in terms of just the gameplay, the story, everything, so I'm doing all this because I really care, and I hope to see things get better. So, like I said, if you have any suggestions, let me know, and I'll see you later.